This is the buyers panel for mergers and acquisitions. We've got some of the most active buyers in the industry up here to talk about their experience and what they're looking for. My name is Jim Perkins. I'm with the Quorum Group, based here in Seattle. We do mergers and acquisitions, and I specialize in the video game space. I've been in video games for 22 years, have sold 2 of my software gaming companies over that period of time, actually 3. I started out in the business of online games through CompuServe. So we were publishing games like Duke Nukem, like Wolfenstein. We were in the early days of many other of the major hits on shareware. So it sounds awfully familiar to what's going on right now. Our model was we'd give away the first part of the game for free. And if the game was good, people would buy the rest of the game either online or at retail. And it turned out really well because we got guys like id Software, Epic started, and many others that are household names in video games today in terms of hit franchises and technology. So what I want to do today is I want to get a buyer's perspective on what's going on in the industry. We have 3 highly distinguished gentlemen here. We have Michael Chang from EA. Well, some of them are highly distinguished.
Exactly.
But we will let you decide which ones are after the session. Michael Chang from EA, Kent Wakefield from Kabam, and Dave Stephenson from Big Fish Games. The way I would like to start is I'd like each of them to describe their company a little bit. We all know what their companies do, but maybe we can get a little perspective on what their backgrounds have been, and then we'll get into some questions. Michael?
So I work at Electronic Arts. It's a small video game company that some of you may have heard of. I'm a reformed venture capitalist, private equity guy. I did 12 years of banking and private equity venture capital before I came to EA. I was actually looking to help a friend. I was on the advisory board of a company in gaming, and I wanted to get to know someone at EA's corp dev team so that 4 years from now, I know to hit up for an investment or acquisition. And next thing you know, here I am.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kent Wakeford. I am EVP of Corp Dev for Kabam. So Kabam is a leading free-to-play core gaming company focused on social games, web games, and mobile games. My background, I've started in the digital space. Jim was talking about CompuServe. I started in the late 90s at Netscape, then AOL, and then kind of moved into the social space. Leading a lot of acquisitions and investments in that space, and then moved into gaming a number of years ago with Kabam.
So I'm Dave Stephenson. I'm the CFO for Big Fish, and Big Fish, as hopefully many of you know, is one of the leading marketplaces for casual games. We're also a producer, developer, and publisher of casual games now across the PC, mobile, and today we announced the cloud.
Yeah, very impressive announcement.
Yeah, so prior to Big Fish, I've been at Big Fish just under a year, spent 12 years at Amazon, most recently as the division CFO for North America.
All right, we're going to get into some questions, but at the end of the session, we'd be happy to send you, we have a couple of M&A reports that we can send you based on gaming. Please leave your business card either over at the table as you go out with Tim or with me. If you'd like to receive that report, and we'll also be able to get you be able to summarize our buyers panel here as well. Also, this is being recorded, so it will go online, and you'll get to review it again if you want to get a review of it. My first question, let's start with Dave. What are you looking for these days in terms of acquisitions? Are there specific categories of products? Are there specific types of products? What are you looking for?
Well, for Big Fish, a lot of what we're looking for would be some differentiated capability that maybe we don't have ourselves. So, that might be in a space of, maybe it's a new mechanic. So as we kind of talked about today, going more in the free-to-play space is definitely an area that we've been actively looking. We closed Self-Aware Games, which is kind of a leading mobile social casino here early in the year that was in exactly that space. So we're definitely interested in there. But it would be those areas that maybe we can't necessarily build or develop quickly ourselves would be kind of a key area. Other might be some technology capability. Again, as you go into free-to-play, the capabilities for data analytics, monetization capabilities or other kind of platform capabilities are important to us, and the speed to execute in those areas could be beneficial. So, we take a look at some of those areas. As we've grown in the last year from maybe 550 people to close to 650, we can only grow so fast internally and organically. And so, if we can bolt on some additional people or a company that can help us grow in those areas, it'd be great.
Is it revenue driven, or is it people driven, or is it strategically
Well, I think
leverage driven?
it starts with strategy, it starts with differentiation, and then I think we fairly quickly go to people because the revenue will come if you feel like you have the right technology, the right business model, or the right people in place. The revenue comes. So we're less worried about that than a great fit.
Okay.
And somebody that maybe is like-minded and we feel will be really effective working with us.
Okay, excellent.
We'd want to be able to provide, if we were to buy somebody, it would be that we could add value to what they already currently do. And so you're going to be working closely together. It's not necessarily a purchase that would just be, kind of one, left put in a corner and left on its own. It would be something we'd want to be able to work very well together.
So integration is really a big part of the deal.
I think fundamentally it's one of the most critical things because I've seen too many instances where a poor integration, you could have a great acquisition that doesn't integrate well, and then
Yeah.
it all falls apart.
Excellent. Yeah, that's we've been reinforcing that a lot in the last couple of sessions. It's plan for that integration. Know what you're going to do when you do join the company. Kent, what are you looking for?
Well, I think to understand what we're looking for, I think the first thing is to understand a little bit about Kabam. So Kabam really established core gaming on Facebook a number of years ago with a game called Kingdoms of Camelot, and has kind of since taken that DNA within the company of really trying to provide a core gaming experience within a social environment, and expanded from Facebook to other social networking sites to the web, and now recently to mobile. We've had a great deal of success being able to build games across multiple platforms. And on the website, have a very big established team with great franchises. What we've seen lately is tremendous success in iOS. We launched a game recently that was the #1 top grossing game on iOS. And it's an area for us that is a key focus for growth. So we are actively looking at the mobile space. And as we look at a space, there are certain things we know we do very well as a company, and certain things that we know that there are other people in the industry who do even better than us. So where we can add value is looking at monetization and customer acquisition. And then what we're looking for are great teams who can help us get into new genres. So if you look at the core market, we're very big in strategy, but there's other genres like RPG, shooters, et cetera. So we're looking for specifically mobile companies within kind of ancillary core genres to what we do.
That's interesting. Okay. Very interesting. All right, let's switch. I'm going to start with you, Michael, in a minute here. How do you initiate these deals? How do you initiate the acquisition? Do people come to you? Do you scour the trade shows?
So EA being a large company with representation across console, PC, mobile, and social, we obviously have deep relationships over the 30 years. A lot of folks who are former employees, current employees who help us find opportunities. We in the corporate dev team actually go out and try and find opportunities in areas that are defined as interesting to EA. At the same time, the business units deal with different areas of expansion, and they find opportunities for us. We have a former member of EA here who's a part of a team called EA Partners, who goes out there and tries to find and partner with the best independent developers who may not want to be part of EA today, but may want to find ways to work with us on distribution. And we've had some of those partnerships that have turned into acquisitions. One great example of that is a company called DICE, the makers of Battlefield based in Stockholm, Sweden. They started off as a partnership with EA through EA Partners, then a minority investment, then ultimately a full acquisition of the company by EA. So it's really a range of ways by which we find deals or are brought into deal processes.
Okay, so I've never heard of Battlefield, but just kidding.
Small game.
Yeah. Yeah, addiction comes to mind when I've dealt with EA in the past, and you do have a number of programs that work people in more organically into the organization, which is interesting.
The way I'd frame it is we'd like to date before we
Yeah.
get married. So if there are ways for us to get to know partners, the most important thing on these acquisitions, and everyone tends to gravitate to the big headline number of the acquisition price. That doesn't matter. At the end of the day, can we buy a company where people stay, where people are happy? Can they produce for us long term? That's the most important thing. And the only way you can tell that is really getting to know those people, hopefully over time. If you're forced into something very quickly, you may not know for sure whether the people across the table from you are people who are going to be fit long term. PopCap, for example, a company here in Seattle that we bought recently, was a relationship that was built up over many, many years. Dice, the same thing. Those are the acquisitions where, there are high prices, but also a little bit more comfort with doing those deals at those prices, because you get to know the teams, you get to know who they are as people, and you get to know that they will be there, work hard, and stay and be passionate about gaming.
Yeah, so I see you doing some of these very large deals, whereas other companies are doing smaller deals, but more rapidly. Kent, do you have any comment on that?
I think for Kabam, we're looking at a lot of smaller, especially in the mobile side, looking to bring in a lot more of higher amount of smaller teams to help us unlock other genres that I mentioned before. So you'll see us, like we have recently, we've made a number of announcements, and we will continue to do that throughout the year, although we are also looking at some kind of bigger plays as well. We think that there's a very unique opportunity in the market right now to kind of go big into mobile, so that's what we're doing.
Okay, Dave, do you have a comment on that? Big deals, medium-sized deals, strategic deals? That getting into gambling is a big deal.
For us, I think by definition, we're generally in smaller deals. I mean,
Yeah.
we're not the largest company out there, and we're going to be very choiceful about who we might work with. So, they're going to most likely be small deals.
Okay. What about red flags? When you're doing due diligence or you're looking at companies that you want to acquire, you may want to do a partnership with, what are some of the red flags that you see, that really you've got to think about avoiding when you're as a seller of a company, you've got to think about avoiding or at least preparing for when you're dealing with these gentlemen? Dave, you want to know?
Well, I think it would be honesty up front. People think you want to start out of the gate being as truthful about kind of results, expectations, capabilities, because through the due diligence process, you'll learn pretty quickly about whether or not what you're saying is true. And we talked a little bit about culture fit too. So I think we spend a lot of time just making sure we kind of validate some of the things we've been told up front. And as long as those things hold true and the trust is there, I think it can work really well. Where I've seen it really fall apart is when somebody tries to build a story, sell you on a story, and you kind of dig in, and it's not really that truthful. And then you can't really have a marriage based on without trust. So.
Yeah. One of the things that we emphasize in what I did selling companies is be upfront about everything. There's a lot of great things about your companies, but there's some things that may come that or exist that may be a problem. And what I've found is that the buyer, if you're being upfront and honest about it, they'll help you solve the problem. And they're in a much better position to solve some of these problems than you are. So if there's these multiple buyers or buyers at the table that have to know everything about the company.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. It's like we actually want to buy someone that we can help solve the problem, because if we aren't in the position to solve the problem, we're not actually adding value. So, it's not necessarily always a bad thing.
Yeah, it's very true. Best deals I've seen is the total honesty, and they're helping each other solve problems. Any other opinions on that, Kent? Red flags?
For us, a lot of it boils down to people. And I think that's core for a company like Kabam, where we focus so much of our time and energy building a culture that resonates throughout the company, that for us to bring in people that have either misaligned expectation or whether it's kind of too big of an ego to fit in the room, so to speak. And that's something that we will kind of turn away immediately, because for us, it's about bringing teams in that can work together. And for us, our culture is people, not projects. And so it's trying to really find people that can work well within Kabam.
Yeah, one of the biggest deal destroyers we see is ego. I've seen them within my companies and other companies we have, that they walk into that room and they really give off a bad vibe, like they're the best at what they do, regardless. The key is to be humble, to explain what you do. I mean, I'll give you an example. John Carmack at ID, one of the more humble guys. Tim Sweeney at Epic, one of the more humble guys I've ever met. These guys prove themselves. They know, everybody knows that they're the best at what they do. They're very humble. They don't have to blow their horn constantly and scream to everybody that they're the best and have a PR agent and a personal assistants and all the rest of it. They do great work, and the proof will be in the pudding. So be honest about it and be humble about it. Any red flags, Michael?
I'd say cultural fit is obviously huge for us. Understanding that the leaders of the companies that we buy can scale with EA in the long term. Two of the label heads for EA come from acquisition. Patrick Soderlund, who heads up our EA Games label, Ray Musica from BioWare. It's huge for us to understand that these folks will stay and continue to work long term and be interested. The company we purchased, PopCap, recently for quite a bit of money. You have leaders like Dave Roberts, Jason Kopalka, John Vichy. You'll know some of these folks. Some of you do know them. They work hard. They work hard today. They are in the game, and that's extremely important to us. I'll actually ask, if I look at the audience here, how many of you are still in Facebook games? Independent Facebook game developers? Got a couple of hands here. Mobile.
Wow.
How about mobile games? Okay.
Wow.
How about just PC client download? A few. Browser-based games. Okay. So the bulk of the people who raised hands in this audience were mobile folks. On the mobile side, we obviously spend a lot of time with companies in this area. We've only made a few acquisitions. One company up in Canada called Byte Games was one of those. We are always looking to understand who's responsible for the game. And in this business, there's publishers, there's developers, there's artists, there's music folks. They all come together to make this game, but we need to understand who's responsible for what. It's one thing to say we made game X or Y, but understanding one level deeper who really was responsible for guiding the process of this game is incredibly important to us. I'll also add on the mobile side, we check. We look at the downloads. We look at the grossing. We understand exactly what it means when your grossing goes through the roof and nothing happens with your downloads and there's no patches or updates. We understand when the downloads go through the roof and there's no reason for downloads to go up, right? So there are a lot of little tricks that folks use, and we do track that. We keep an eye on that, and we do maintain and monitor and understand what the download farms are, what it means to spend your own money on marketing, and we don't give credit to that. It's not important for us. We can't do that ourselves. That's not something we'll use in the future. It's meaningless to us. So keep that in mind, because that is something that we look at. We do look at folks who organically grow, who have built up the traffic sources themselves, who are legitimate, I'd say. It's important.
Yeah, so you're just not going to believe the numbers. You can't fake it.
We will check, and we have history. We have banks of data that are stored up by our teams that we can go back and check and verify that they tie to rankings on the App Store over time.
Can I just ask a question? Because we've had this conversation before, and we look at a lot of companies as well, and I personally have not run into that many instances of people. I mean, yes, people buy incentivized traffic and other things, but really trying to game metrics. Are you seeing that a lot?
Not a lot, but it's happened. And so we just have to be cautious about that.
Yeah.
We have to be diligent in our work. So.
I'm seeing a lot of Asian companies get more aggressive with their investments and acquisitions, more than ever. We were doing some of their deals 5-6 years ago. They weren't really playing in that space. They weren't active in buying into North American companies. Do you see competition from them increasing in certain areas? And maybe explain some experiences without revealing too much.
So we do keep track of activity. Obviously, Tencent bought Riot Games, League of Legends. Recent investment in Epic Games, Perfect World, some of this. We've seen some partnerships, Kong Zong's licensed World of Tanks and a few other properties. We keep an eye on their activities. Is it competition? Sure, but there's plenty of ways for us to cooperate as well. Tencent is working with our Sim Social game, for instance. So we do find ways to work with Asian competitors, for lack of a better word. Our game, FIFA, is on Korea, #1 game right now, doing quite well. We have minority investment in a Korean company out there, quite a large one. So there's a lot of ways where we can work with folks as well, compete.
Yeah, so like the game industry is definitely, there's a lot of intertwining relationships, and it's a very small industry in terms of relationships, and we do cooperate quite a bit to help each other in gaining while we're being competitive. What about you, Kent? Are you competing in that market or competing against other companies?
I see more competition from Michael right here than from the Asian gaming companies. I mean that in seriously. So I look at what EA is doing, and we've looked at similar companies. We compete with Zynga a lot. I think that what you've seen with Gree and Funzio is obviously a big acquisition in the mobile space, and so, a company that's clearly in our genres. So we do see them coming in, and I do think that there will be more acquisitions done, whether it's on the mobile side with Gree and DNA. Perfect World, we know, is very active. Tencent, I believe, will be more and more active. So I think they're coming. I think on the mobile side, we will feel the competition, and then I think that they'll probably compete more with EA on some of the bigger acquisitions.
Okay, Dave?
Yeah, we're not really seeing competition in that space from Asian folks with
No.
the things that we're looking at.
What about European players? Have you seen any activity, competition for acquisitions or investment from European players? I'm not seeing as much, but I could.
So from an EA perspective, the amount of direct competition we have head-to-head against someone is not as much as you might think. If we are seeking to buy a company, we go for our own reasons. We're not moving because someone else says we want to buy. Companies that I've acquired in the last couple of years that have had direct competition from Asian buyers or European buyers, frankly, none. And some of my other colleagues have experienced limited competition in that sense as well. Maybe one head-to-head deal that's been referenced a few times against Zynga, and perhaps one against my neighbor to the left here, but that's it.
What about private equity firms? Any
Yeah.
competition for private equity firms?
Not direct competition, but they're certainly investing in companies and often paying a very high valuation that those companies will need to grow into over
Yeah.
time in order for them to get liquidity to ourselves. Otherwise, they're going to do hot swaps between private equity firms.
Right, the strategic, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I think, just to echo what Michael said, I think that's something for anyone in the audience to think about is, as you look at raising capital, and I think it's important for companies to raise capital and grow, but it's also at what valuation and what expectation do you set for yourself, and the need to be able to grow into that, to be able to create a liquidity event at some point for you as a company. So I think what Michael was referencing is some of the investments coming in have been at highly inflated valuations in some segments of the market. And I think at that point, it puts the founders into a very tough situation and limits potential exit scenarios if that's something that you're interested in.
I'd actually like you to expand on that just a bit, but it's interesting to note that the strategic buyers out there, the amount of cash that they have is at an all-time high. We're estimating it at about $250 billion that strategic buyers have right now to buy your company. Not all of it's going into one company. And the private equity guys, they have about $500 billion that they have to spend in software and business and technology. So we're seeing some aggression there. They are overpaying in some cases, or at least the perception here is that they are overpaying, so the valuations are through the roof in some cases. But expand, Kent, on what you said about it could be harmful or it could be put you in a position, the buyers or founders in a position that may not be ideal.
So we think about it a lot as a private company, and we've been fortunate to raise a great deal of capital. We had Google Ventures led our last round, and we've done very well in terms of capital raise. But it does set the bar at very high, both for us and then as a acquirer, when we look at companies and the expectations that whether it's VCs, private equity, or other investors have when they invest in a company, it's looking at a multiple for return on their capital. And when you get into some of the valuations that people, I think less so now with some exceptions in casino or other areas, but I think what you saw 9 months ago in mobile, very frothy valuations that would make an exit difficult for some founders. And so it's just a word of caution. It's really nice to get a really huge check at a really lofty valuation, but make sure you could grow into that and that you have a clear runway of what you're going to do with that capital and be able to put it to work to be able to grow.
I'm happy to be more specific. I worked in venture capital for quite a number of years. Many of the funds I worked at were 10-year lifetime funds. They close a fund a certain period of time, they invest for 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time, maybe a little longer, and they seek an exit. And oftentimes, companies will take a long time to come to that exit point. There are time dynamics around this that will give pressure to funds. Good funds will resist on the time pressure, but many have these dictates that they have to operate under. Raising money is not the end, it's just the beginning. We are looking for returns when you're a venture guy. You need 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times your money or more. That's what you are seeking, and you will drive a company to achieve those goals if you can. Just to comment on the private equity side, we are seeing a lot more activity in the private equity worlds coming here. Ontario Teachers put money in Tryon World more recently, BigPoint and TA and Summit in BigPoint. TCV actually has invested in our company. There's a lot of money sitting on the sidelines, and it does. You have an inordinate pressure to invest that money, and you often put it in at perhaps prices where if you didn't have that pressure, you wouldn't put it in. So.
Great wisdom there, no question. A specific example I know about, didn't turn out that well, but private equity came into a smaller software company with very high expectations. They bought a minority position in the company, but with some conditions. So the founders were put in a position of performing to the letter on everything they said they would do. Well, guess what happens? Sometimes you can't do, or the markets change and you can't perform exactly the way you need to perform, and you lose control of your company. And that can happen. So be aware of that when you're doing those types of deals. It puts a lot of pressure on the founders, no question, as Michael said. All right, some market trends. Dave, you've been bought, self-aware. Obviously, you feel gambling and gaming is a strategic area that you want to be in. Are there any other areas you want to be in, or do you want to comment on the gambling space specifically?
I probably want to. I don't think we're going to buy another gambling company anytime soon. But but I do think that we are kind of bridging, and it's a good business. We already have one, right? I think part of our business is bridging the gap now between what we have with self-aware and kind of the mobile space and our existing, titles that Big Fish has been publishing, and now we can actually kind of fill in many of those gaps with a broader range of customers. And so, we have an internal studio game of Fairway Solitaire, and we could see other games that are maybe not the typical hidden object, adventure games that we might do. So, we're broadening out our portfolio. Maybe it's a bit, as you were saying, other genres or other things that customers might like to see. So, kind of filling in those gaps.
I think we've seen a number of waves, and if you kind of roll back the clock 2.5 years ago, a lot of investment capital was going into social gaming. I think you're now seeing a lot of that play out, and some companies have done very well and some have not. And I don't think there's as much capital, with few exceptions, going into kind of that specific area. I think you saw the second wave in mobile. And I think that's still kind of playing out a little bit. And then casino, which obviously you guys made an acquisition in. I think that's probably one of the more frothy areas right now, because it's not just the traditional game companies who are looking at it, but also there's the expectation and hope that legalized gambling can happen at some point. So you have a different set of investors also coming into the market to make it even more competitive. So I think that in terms of kind of trends and frothiness, I think that's probably kind of at the peak right now?
You know, I was talking to Jessica Tams from Casual Connect earlier today, and she told me that this conference had been here for about 7 years. How many of you guys, just by show of hands, were here 7 years ago for the first? 5 years ago? 3 years ago? 1 year ago? So as we did a poll of hands earlier, there were very few folks in Facebook, much more in mobile, some in the PC downloadable area. These things have indeed come in waves. I think 6 or 7 years ago, portals would have been the hottest thing since sliced bread. We have Pogo. You have the original Big Fish as to the newer Big Fish today. 4 or 5 years ago, mass casual Facebook games, the hottest thing on the face of the earth. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, iOS, and then free-to-play iOS. Some people say Android today. The areas where we're targeting are constantly changing, and we have to stay in front of these changes and developments. And I'd ask you guys selfishly to think about where you think we're going to buy in 2 or 3 or 4 years' time, because as you're building those companies to that point in value where we might buy or others might buy, that is what you're aiming for. It's possible you might want to sell today, but if you are aiming for a meaningful exit in 2 or 3 years' time, think about what it is that we want to buy 2 or 3 years from now. What will be the new trend? What will be the new dynamic? Not matching what's out there today. There are dozens of mobile game companies on iOS free-to-play now. Hundreds of companies who are saying, we want to be the next casino game. We want to be the next Double Down casinos. Not that many are going to make it. And so as a consequence, think about the future. Think about 2, 3, 4 years out. What is it? Is it streaming gaming? Sony bought Gaikai. Is that the path of the future? Is it connected TV? Is it a next generation console? Those are, I'd have you think about the future versus matching what you see from people today who are getting a little revenue and a little profit, because selfishly, that is where you'll derive value for yourselves in the future and hopefully make games that everyone enjoys playing.
Well, maybe pile on, because I think it's a great point and maybe reinforces some of the things we said earlier. It's like, it goes back to just having a great team because you need a team that is nimble enough and capable of kind of riding many of those changes. And more think about some of the foundational elements of the company. So what are your analytical skills? What are the technology backbone look like? What does your game QA look like? What does your speed of development look like? So what are the foundational, I don't know, I almost call them the inputs of building your business, because you're right, every year it's changing, and if we were to consider an acquisition of talent of a company, it's the talent and as a capability and capacity to grow and change and be something more meaningful in the future. Because if all you're doing is buying a game for today, the longevity of that, you don't know how long this is. It might last 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, but the likelihood of that one IP lasting for multiple years is low. So what you really have to do is you have to buy a team that you're confident in that can build the next one or have the next capability. So
Can I echo that? I agree 100%. As we look at a lot of companies, and I'll give one example because I saw someone out of the corner of my eye. Kabam acquired a studio called Fearless not too long ago that was run by former LucasArts console developers, Hayden Blackman, who is here in the audience, highly distinguished, amazing console developer who saw, similar to what Michael was talking about, saw a number of years back kind of the market changing and kind of led a shift for him and some of his colleagues into building into kind of the next generation. And it is really that team dynamic of being able to build great games and be able to adapt to the changing market. And I think that is the core for any of our companies to adapt and have great talent like that who can build highly engaging, great games, but are also willing to adapt and move with the fluidity of the market as we see it today.
Yeah, that's been the traditional way to go. I mean, for the last 25 years. Those are the key attributes of great companies that do well and great leaders that do well. What about well, there's two questions. Smart TV, I see smart TVs being a key element of social gaming in the living room. And two, what role is that new generation or next generation console going to play in that arena? And that may be more applicable to some of you and not to others, but I don't know. Smart TV seems like the new social. Comments?
It's early days for everyone. I see, developments like the Angry Birds on the Roku box. Obviously, we all talk about and wonder what Apple TV will be. Gaikai was recently acquired by Sony. Whether it's streaming or smart TV, many of us who have bought new TVs, it's effectively a mini computer, right? It's a computer that receives software updates. I've got a nice Sony TV, one of these nice 3D LCDs, and every couple of weeks or months, I get this update that I have to patch up. There are a lot of capabilities available. A lot of the motion sensor systems, thinking about what you can do with a motion sensor system on a TV now, it's amazing. You can actually have effectively a touchscreen look and feel on a large screen TV. A lot of different applications to be applied, perhaps taking games from the mobile world and bringing them over to the smart TV. Perhaps console games can be streamed across, such where you don't have to have a lot of compute power, you just have to have connectivity, good connectivity to the back-end point of presence. There's certainly just a number of different opportunities available. Yeah. But early days.
Very early days. Yeah. All right. Other opinions on smart TV, next-gen consoles?
Well, it's interesting, Michael, you asked people to raise their hands on which platforms they're kind of developing for. I mean, I think one of the things that we like to try to think about our businesses is being more platform agnostic, and how can we just build great games that can go into multiple places. And that's easier said than done. It's why we're so bullish and excited about launching Big Fish Unlimited today, because we would love to just have great developers that maybe you raise your hand and said, hey, you can do this great mobile game. We'd love to be able to take it to PC, and we'd love to be able to take it to the TV. Now, the reality is it's early days. We'll see how it goes, and it's going to be a tough challenge ahead. But again, I think that's why you want people that have the technology chops to kind of build great games in the first place that then can go anywhere and can be fluid enough that depending on what comes to play with connected TVs, maybe you're going to have to adapt to a Roku controller, which is going to be a different animal than a multi-touch Xbox controller or something. So I don't know. It's going to be challenging.
I think the ultimate challenge is the controllers. I think the motion recognition is really important. It's amazing today. It's going to get better. Voice recognition should be very, very, I think it will come a long way to control those devices. How many of you are developing for smart TV specifically?
Very early days.
Very early days. Thanks, Michael. Yeah, you said it. Okay.
How many for Windows Mobile 8?
Well, there you go.
Oh. Interesting how you hear a lot of talk about iOS and certainly a lot of talk on Android. I'd say maybe a year ago, I wouldn't be talking about Windows Mobile 8.
Interesting. Okay, I'm going to open it up to questions in a minute from the audience. Any words of wisdom or advice for smaller studios these days? I think you've given some great advice on how to position yourself and how to be flexible, how to think about what the next markets may be. But any additional words of wisdom for the audience? Kent?
So for us, and I'll speak specifically from a Kabam perspective, it's first and foremost, it's what we all do, which is build great games. So that's the core fundamental kind of premise of anything, is build great, highly engaging games. For us as a free-to-play mobile social web developer, backbone for us is metrics. So there are certain key metrics that are important for us, and when we look at a company, we look to see if a game has kind of the core fundamentals, whether it's monetization and retention. Because for us, when we see a team that we want to bring in, it's not only the people but also the game, and can we take all of the capital we have and the marketing expertise and everything and take that game and really build it into a long-lasting franchise. So for us, we're very metrics focused in seeing if the game has the potential to become a huge franchise, and then coming together with Kabam, can we help achieve those goals, not only for Kabam but also for the company, the acquired company. So for us, it's people and kind of core metrics of a game.
Okay. Dave?
Yeah, I was going to say the same
Dale?
thing. I was going to say analytics. I
Same
mean,
thing.
if you're not already good at it yourself, or you don't have somebody in your company that's good at data analytics, get somebody tomorrow and build the infrastructure to to do that analysis. It's hyper important, at least to us. That's what drives our
Yeah,
business.
there's a couple of studios I know, one in San Diego and one in Los Angeles, and that's their key skill. I mean, they make great games, but the analytics is they've made 10 games, and the way they did it is they looked at the analytics and they figured it out, and that has made them very, very valuable as a result. Michael, anything to add?
Great companies will always make great games. I didn't get to answer the question earlier on, what are we looking for? But first and foremost, what I look for is developers of great IP. They could be Rovio making the Angry Birds, or Mario Brothers, or Tetris. In PopCap's case, it was Plants vs. Zombie and Bejeweled. Folks who are able to find and capture lightning in a bottle while combining the analytic capability and the science of gaming, they're worth their weight in gold.
Yeah, thanks for adding that. It's really critical, building that IP, building your original IP. Most games that do well are original IP. They're not based on some other movie or television show or lifestyle brand. They're original IP. It's been proven since the beginning of time on video games. All right, why don't we open it up to questions? Who's going first? Come on up to the microphone if you can, or grab the microphone. Leah's got one there.
So are you looking for studios that have and are expanding out into other channels to increase their brand awareness that are different than everybody else as well? Say augmented reality or second screen, that type of thing, and maybe other channels like toys or clothing lines ahead of everybody else?
Well, we're not. I would see, toys and other things being, we're not such a hit-driven company, so the toys and things would be things you'd add to a hit, big hit games, and we're not really branching onto augmented things.
Yeah, we're not either. As I mentioned before, at least short and medium term, our focus is mobile. So we're looking at teams that have been able to kind of develop, as Michael said, great IP for that specific platform, and then really helping them build that IP and that brand.
To the augmented reality side, that is an interesting area. Have we seen a lot of great successes to date, commercially or critically? Not really. So we keep on looking, hoping that we will find something. But I can't point to many great successes today. On the licensing side, EA is quite a large company with a number of properties and IPs developed over 30-odd years. We actually have a team dedicated to taking that IP and bringing it out. It could be taking Dead Space and turning it into a direct-to-DVD anime made by Funimation or something like that. It could be licensing out or optioning Need for Speed to see if we can have a movie at some point in time. So we will seek additional avenues for revenue. If a company is sophisticated in that regard, we certainly won't hold it against them. And hopefully companies that we bring to EA can benefit from the teams that we have who have that expertise and understand how to negotiate those things. We certainly commend Rovio for doing quite a good job of licensing their properties out to the world at large.
Okay, Need for Speed movie. Need for Speed, one of my favorite products. So I'm looking, sorry, just kidding. No knowledge of a Need for Speed movie.
Yeah, hi. I'd like a quick thumbs up or thumbs down from each of you on the Zynga acquisition of OMG Pop. Good deal or bad?
Oh boy. Great question.
Dan Porter and I get along just fine, and Wilson Kriegel over at OMG Pop, and many of you know Wilson, get along fine. I'm super happy that Zynga paid him. Super happy.
So that's one thumbs up for Dan Porter.
I give a thumbs up to the OMG Pop team for a great exit for themselves. From my own perspective, I think Zynga can turn it into something. I'm just kind of, for me, it's a little bit of a kind of wait and see. So sorry for not having a definitive up or down. I do think that they will continue to invest in that brand and that franchise. I just don't know if they can really truly capitalize it.
I don't know what to say. It's a great company, expensive one. So
Yeah. It's what they do with the company, I think. You said it, Kent. It's what they do with that brand. They must have big plans for the brand, but it's what they do with it, how they can execute on that, that's going to be the telling tale. Other questions?
Hi. All the members of the panel, and just now, you touched on the word of brand and IP. What actually defines whether something is a brand or whether the IP has value?
That's a good question.
I definitely want to pass on answering this one first.
No, I'm happy to talk about it, how we look at it. So for us, within kind of our world of free-to-play social mobile gaming, we've been able to create games that attract millions and millions of users. So we have 40 million users, registered users online, and millions on mobile. And as we look at a game, whether it's Kingdoms of Camelot or Dragons of Atlantis, those games have attracted users who have been playing for years and years and years, and continue to invest in their gameplay. And the games do very well both financially and from a user perspective. So when we look at a potential what we call franchise, we're looking at games that have the capacity to scale, and to scale from a user perspective as well as a financial perspective. And that's what we really are excited about investing in. You know, I think that for us is the definition. That's not quite the Angry Birds IP level, but for us, if we can continue to add to the number of franchises we have, we will do that all day long.
Yeah, and I think our definition of brands may be a little bit different as well. I mean, it tends to be our brands, you know, maybe think about Big Fish Studio title like Mystery Case Files, maybe a marquee title that gets produced kind of once a year. The people know the characters, or they know the general kind of look and feel, and you know, the way in which the game's built, and then it's something that we can kind of scale out over time. You know, like Paul Thielen earlier this morning kind of did, you know, showed a case example where we are taking the game to multiple platforms and then can extend it to free to play. Well, it's a very different mechanic, but it uses a lot of the same kind of artwork, uses some of the characters, uses some of the look and feel. And so for us, that's more what kind of brand or IP looks like, is something that can maybe use the word scale. For us, scales is a little different, but ours would scale across platforms, maybe scale across mechanics with kind of a base storyline. But we're not looking for ourselves necessarily for the next big Angry Birds. We're not trying to go create that.
You know, folks much smarter than me at EA have, over the past 30 years, either created or licensed great brands and franchises that stand the test of time. Battlefield, Need for Speed, Medal of Honor, Madden Football, FIFA Soccer, The Sims. The BioWare folks, Dragon Age, Mass Effect. It's a bit of an unmanageable or unknown quantity, what creates that lightning in a bottle. But you can recognize that over time if you've had some experience doing that. And I benefit from the fact that there are over 9,000 odd employees of EA, and many of them understand and get that sense as to what will be special in the long term. And I get to call upon them and get their perspectives and their expertise as to whether this will work and withstand the test of time across platforms and across generations. It's fun to go back and you think, and many of us have memories of the original Wing Commander or the original Ultima. You know, those properties, Hard Hat Mac in the early days, Archon, for those of you who remember those properties, and they can come back over time. So it's a bit of a knowable quantity, tough to quantify, but again, those creative folks, those designers will know what that is and they can recognize that. And that's what's so special about our group.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys. John, you have a question?
Oh, yes. Interested in what makes a company particularly attractive. And you mentioned the IP products that are really hot. How about like having an audience, or do you ever engage in just plain acqui-hires where you just buy a company just to get the developers on your team?
So from Kabam, at this point, we're not focused a lot on acqui-hires. I think that good news is we have a great culture and we can kind of hire great talent well at this point. What we're more focused on is identifying teams that are passionate about a game that they're building. And if we can get to a point where we share that same passion and a common vision of how to really grow that game into whether it's a franchise or some kind of iconic brand, that's something that gets us excited. So what we're looking for is we're looking for teams that have that passion, that have that game, that idea that they truly believe in and that they want to grow, and that we want to get behind their vision and help them bring that to market and bring it to fruition. So for us, it's much more about finding those teams that have kind of an idea of their own. Either earlier before it's a hit, or we would not do it when it's peaked. At least I hope not. But we would try and get earlier, and especially when a team needs that push to be able to make it really big.
Yeah, we're not doing acqui-hires really either, although again, I think we said earlier, it's like you'd want to have a great team that would be great fits, so they'd be great parts of the team. And Michael said it well, right? You'd want to have people that are going to be there 5-7 years from now and be really effective leaders for the next version of whatever it is, on whatever platform or whatever kind of game. And I do think it'd be great. It is helpful sometimes to bring in new customers, or customers that they'd be very complementary to our existing base of customers. But I think that's like a different reason maybe to potentially purchase something. It maybe is a proof point of how good the IP might be, a game might be, or the brand might be. And so you almost use it as evidence of why this might be a great acquisition. So.
All right, good. Michael?
Just in the past 2 years, the companies that we have acquired in the corporate development team have been either studios or companies. No real acqui-hires as defined as such. It's not to say that we wouldn't at some point in time if a business unit demanded that, but as of today, it's really the focus around full studios or full companies.
All right, well, we're going to wrap up. I want to thank the panelists. Great panel. Lots of experience. I encourage you to ask some questions after if you want, but please leave your business cards at the back, and we'll get you reports, M&A reports specifically on gaming. And thank you to our panelists. Excellent job.